Welcome to Chapter 6, The Birth of a Nation. In this chapter, we're going to be looking at our government, how it got started, what were the problems, what were the solutions. And in our first lesson, we're going to be looking at the Articles of Confederation. This was a plan too weak to work. It was our first form of government, right here, the Articles of Confederation. And if we look at our words to know, Confederation right here, a union of people, states, or nations that join together, often with some political power given to a central authority. Usually this means it's a weak central authority. We've been conditioned to think Confederation, Confederate, that's the South in the Civil War. Well, they get the word from somewhere. And the Confederation is usually a loose assembly of countries or provinces that come together. They give a little bit of power to a central government, but really the power resides with the countries or states that are joining together. It's like a very, very strong alliance. And that's what we have here in the Articles of Confederation. The states come together, they vote on things. So New York would say, yes, we want this, and Connecticut would say, no, we want that. And then the 13 colonies, the 13 states would vote yes or no, and if they had more votes for the yes, then it would happen. Otherwise, it wouldn't. It was very simple, very weak government, where you think about it, makes sense because they're coming from a British government with a strong central authority, and the states didn't like that they were being pushed around by a strong central authority, so why would they make another one? So they simply just made the Articles of Confederation so that they can join together and cooperate and make their own country. So in 1777, they declared that soon after independence was declared, the Articles of Confederation were officially adopted, and the system was put in place throughout the entire war. Now, what we should have in our notes is that the Articles of Confederation were good for two things. First, obviously, it helps win the Revolutionary War. Without it, each state fights Great Britain on their own, and there's no coordination. So Articles of Confederation helps there. Secondly, it set the ground rules. Right here we see, sets the ground rules for governing Northwest Territory, a region that included what would soon become the state of Ohio. We talked quite a bit about this in class, of how important the Ohio Valley is, and anyway, let's take a quick look, a recap at what's been going on. So we have these claims. Remember we talked about that when they started colonizing, they just colonized this area and said, okay, we're going all the way as far as the eye can see west. So you see North Carolina goes here, South Carolina, Georgia, Virginia, okay? And then we get this map where the French come in and basically cut off any kind of westward movement because they have claimed the Mississippi River Valley. And we know the story of the French and Indian War, where now this territory becomes English, so anything east of the Mississippi River becomes the British. Here we have 13 colonies. So 13 colonies rebel, and after the war, we actually see that America gets this land here. Get this. Oops. Let me get this. Okay. A little bit too big here. Let me fix that. All right. So America gets this land here east of the Mississippi. Not Canada, but all this land here. So what ends up happening, of course? Well, Virginia's going to say, hey, look, we got this land back. And, North Carolina, hey, we're going to, as far west as we can go, and Georgia. So all this new territory that comes in that they considered was theirs and not theirs, and the Proclamation of 1763 kind of puts a damper on it. But you can see here Virginia starts claiming crazy stuff like land up here. Massachusetts, Massachusetts is over here, and they're claiming land in New York, they're claiming land in Michigan, Wisconsin, Connecticut, and Virginia are claiming this land. And so it looks like the states might fight each other over these lands, because if they don't start claiming lands west, they're going to get weaker, or they're going to stay the same, while all these other countries that have a western border are going to get stronger. And this is a really big problem. The Articles of Confederation sets it up so that we set up the Northwest Territories, we start organizing new states. Instead of saying, okay, here are the states, you can get this land, and you can get Virginia, you can have this, and North Carolina, you can have that. Instead they say, okay, we're going to cut off the western borders here, and we're going to start making new territories or states like Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, Territory of Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Alabama, Mississippi. And so they start organizing this area, and it really does avert a really big problem. So that is a very huge success of the Articles of Confederation. So that was a really good thing. Now, it's not to say that it didn't have its problems. It had 5 major weaknesses. First, it was a weak national government. This was by design. They didn't want a king. They didn't want people telling them what to do. So they made sure that the states had control of everything. The federal government could come together, make decisions, but it really was up to the states to implement what the National Congress was going to do. So, so it just could not do very much. And one of the reasons why it couldn't do very much is because it was a weak Congress. Okay, they only had the legislative body, and so they vote on something, but they couldn't collect taxes. They couldn't print money. Well, we'll get to the print money, but they couldn't collect taxes. So if you don't have money, how can you do anything? Imagine going to the mall and you don't have any money. What are you going to be able to do? You just walk around and look at things, and that's about it. You can't really accomplish anything. You could not control commerce. Commerce has to do with trade. So if New York and New Jersey wanted to trade and there was a dispute, Congress couldn't do anything about it. It was really up to the states, and so the states would get on each other's cases. Hey, you're cheating me on this, and no, we're not, and whatever. So Congress really couldn't do very much about it. Number 3, no national currency. This is the other thing with money. Congress could not print money. The dollars that you have in your wallet would be issued by the state. So imagine if you went to the mall across the border and you had to exchange your money to that state's money, and then when you come back you had to go back to an exchange and get your state's money so that you can go to a local store. It would be very confusing, very annoying, and it wouldn't be the same switch over. So for instance, let's say you live in New York and you go to New Jersey, and New Jersey's dollars are not worth that much. So you go there with your New York dollar and you exchange it for 3 New Jersey dollars, and it sounds like you're getting more money, but you really can't. So it gets confusing, and then it would fluctuate. Next time you go over there, you get $5, the New Jersey dollars, for 1 New York dollar, because the economies are doing. It gets very complicated, and it's very confusing. And what if one state doesn't want to accept? Maybe Virginia doesn't want to accept North Carolina dollars. No, that's not good here. You got to, we're not going to exchange it. We think it's worth less, and then you get more disputes. So there's a lot of arguments that are popping up because of these weaknesses in the government. One of the biggest arguments is the one state, one vote. Rhode Island, very small state. Delaware, another small state, would have the same power as a huge state like Virginia. Virginia was very big back then, and they did not have the same power as these smaller states. They felt, hey, we got more people, so we should have more power. And so this created another argument. This is another big sticking issue of trying to get the country together. And then finally, no executive and judicial branches. There's nobody to make sure that everybody carries out the law. So imagine if we have a law, you can't run a red light. Well, if there's no police and no courts, and people start running the red lights, who's going to stop them? Obviously another car crashing into it is going to stop them, but people are going to break the law if there's nobody that's going to enforce it. You just find every bad person out there, it's going to happen. So it was a really big problem. Even if they said this is a law, the states could just ignore them, and this was a big problem. So they realized they cannot continue with the Articles of Confederation as it is. They have two choices. They can get rid of the Articles of Confederation and get a new government, or they can try to fix the Articles of Confederation, try to make it work a little bit better. They decide on the first thing. They decide to scrap the Articles of Confederation in 1787 and have a constitutional convention. Now, what you do need to remember about the Constitutional Convention is that George Washington is elected as president of the Constitutional Convention. So before he becomes president of the United States, he's the president of the Constitutional Convention. So he's commander-in-chief of the army during the Revolutionary War. He retires after the war, and then they bring him back to be president of the Constitutional Convention to preside over what's going to happen there. Basically, someone who presides says, okay, it's your turn to talk. Okay, so-and-so wants to speak. Hold on a second. Let him finish. Okay, now it's your turn to talk. And they felt that he would be a good, calming, and commanding presence as someone who would be fair to everybody. So that's why he was elected. So George Washington is the president of the Constitutional Convention at this part of our story. Okay. Tomorrow, well, we'll start moving into what happens with the Constitutional Convention, but the Articles of Confederation, two successes was the Revolution and organizing the Northwest Territories. 5 weaknesses: weak national government, weak Congress, no national currency, one state, one vote, no executive or judicial branches. And then finally we go into the Constitutional Convention. George Washington was elected president of the Constitutional Convention. I hope that helps. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.